All right, video number 2, here we go. So I'm currently sitting on my porch because it's a lot less windy here than it is out in the wilds. For those of you that don't know Glenorchy, this is typical spring weather. The wind gets up and it's nuts. So I'm out here on my porch in the sun, and I just wanted to share with you, I watched David Attenborough's documentary on Netflix recently, and that kind of gave me a bit of an anchor point around starting this journey for what does it look like to put a very real climate commitment into my business. So Attenborough talks about these boundaries that we've been crossing as humans. And it's all the things that, sorry, I'm just finding my notes. It's all the things that we're used to talking about, right? It's about air pollution, it's about carbon emissions, it's about microplastics. It's all of these things that are very familiar to us, right? Nothing new. And but what I liked about that documentary is that it provides this framework of kind of these 9 key areas, and then puts, I guess, in place, for me it was enough framework to understand how to make some measurable change. So for each of these boundaries, we can talk about metrics that might be associated with improvement in each of these areas. So I've done some scribbles in my notebook, and I wanted to just start to share some of those with you because this is how my thinking evolves. And yeah, I'm here for the real kind of raw conversation, and this is not going to be perfect, but I figure if you start to see where my brain's starting from, then hopefully that'll give you some ideas in your business. So I'm going to talk you through my notebook, and my handwriting's terrible, but you'll love it. It'll be fine. So I'll do a bit of a voiceover. Just starting on the left-hand side. So the 9 kind of areas that Attenborough talks about in his Boundaries doco. We've got carbon dioxide, so parts per million in the air. Pretty straightforward, right? Aerosols and particulates is another key boundary. Nutrients, so we're talking about the over-fertilisation of our soils, our waterways, that kind of think intensive farming and some of the bad stuff that goes along with trying to produce food for our community. Oceanic Acidification is another boundary. Talking about fresh water, just what our fresh water is doing generally. Biodiversity, we've got human pollutants, so that's your nuclear waste, heavy metals, microplastics, what they call persistent organic particulates. We've got a boundary here around ozone and also around deforestation. So those are in no particular order. And just, yeah, I guess this is kind of the cheat sheet for the documentary, but I'd highly recommend it. I really enjoyed it. And it's Attenborough's presentation of another scientist's work, so I should probably do him the credit of going and finding his name and making sure I chop that into the detail for this video so that you can go and find it. And then, so there's a couple of other things that we talk about in terms of measures that come up during that conversation. So 7% per annum reduction in carbon emissions. Talking about planting trees as being something that has an impact on both the biodiversity, also the deforestation. And so what I did was I drew myself a little alluvial diagram. So for those of you that know me and my business, I do a lot with visual tools. Alluvial diagrams are super cool. It's just about drawing connection points. So on the left-hand side, I've got a bunch of, I guess, solutions that were mentioned in the doco. And on the right-hand side, we've got the set of boundaries. And all this diagram is doing is saying, if we go through that list of carbon reduction, planting trees, plant-based diet and circular economy, which are the things that come up in the doco, how do they relate to each of those other 9 boundaries? Like, what are we impacting? And so this is just a little diagram that I drew for myself to say, here's the things that were recommended in the documentary, and here's how they relate to each of those 9 boundaries as per like what I heard. So yeah, like super simple stuff, right? Planting trees actually has an impact across a whole bunch of different areas. Really cool. Plant-based diet, like at this point, I'm sorry in advance to all of my meat eaters that want to come on retreat, but this is just a change I'm going to have to make for retreats, is that we're going to have to go to a plant-based diet. I've been whole foods plant-based now for almost a decade myself. I never wanted to force that on people, but actually I think for my own responsibility now, I'm at a point where I need to commit to that in my business. So that was something that came out of this conversation. Circular economy, like product packaging and stuff, great conversation, really, really novice in that area. And CO2 reduction. So what I'm going to start to dive into there are like lots of stuff around transport, obviously, and the supply chain for actually getting my customers all the way through to a retreat. And then also what I'm doing myself in terms of, we use helicopters to get people to remote locations. I'll often be driving, ground-based transport, driving in gear, that sort of thing. So what does that look like in terms of our carbon footprint reduction? Had a great conversation actually with a local company here earlier in the week around digital products as a way to reduce carbon footprint per dollar of revenue. So it's those sorts of things that we're looking at. So that's just a quick overview of some of the notes I took out of that, like one documentary, right? Just one. But that's part of what I wanted to document for you was like, this is the stuff that I'm thinking about and I'm learning. So I will drop some notes in the description for you so that you can go and track this stuff down. And I'm working on trying to get this alluvial diagram into something that's a bit more pretty and maybe downloadable. But by all means, feel free to hack, make your own. Like figure out what you're going to do that's going to have an impact across those 9 boundaries. That's where I'm starting today. And just a few pretty New Zealand mountains for those of you who wanted some scenery. Enjoy.